Yes, please.
Are there any authors that have sort of influenced the way that you write or your style of writing?
I'll turn this over to either one of those.
Okay, I'll
I
start.
certainly hope so.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's almost too many to name. I will focus on one. It's funny, especially talking to book clubs and things like that. I'll often mention William Gibson, and I'm surprised. Maybe it's just a sort of a genre thing or whatever. I'm still surprised at how many people haven't read and in fact have not heard of William Gibson. But for me, he's been a huge influence. And I think you wouldn't necessarily know it by the tone, because his books are a little dark and a little cold, and I don't think anyone would accuse Penumbra of being either of those things. But he does this thing, which I just wish more writers would do, which is that he tries to distill and kind of, get his hands on right now. And I really appreciate that. I really love reading books that feel like they were written 15 minutes from now somehow. It's such a magic trick to be able to pull that off. And so in that particular, with that sort of, in respect to that particular characteristic, he's one of my biggest inspirations and I guess aspirational models.
Cool.
Well, I was going to bring up Gibson as well. Certainly for my first novel, it was all I wanted to write like. I wanted to write William Gibson writing superhero action. That was it for me. I didn't get a tattoo, but I could have. And I'm never not going to want to have the sort of intensity and kind of crackle and sort of grip of his prose on the contemporary world. It just remains a model. For this I was going to some other places. I clearly thought about Borges a whole bunch, and I thought about Ellen Ullman a good deal, who wrote Close to the Machine and Bug both about working in the software industry, and she really kind of captured this sort of very strange consciousness that you experience in an office that is producing software. I'm still confused about her not being famous, but I guess she is not.
Totally. And people, I'm glad you brought her up, because if people in this room don't know Ullman, her office is literally around the corner. She's like the presiding writerly spirit of this neighborhood, and her books, one memoir and two novels now, are just like essential San Francisco reading.
O-L-M-A-N?
U-L-L-M-A-N, Ellen Ullman. Required reading for tech-inclined San Franciscans.
We require it.
Yes. You have to report back.
Hey, who's this Gibson dude? You in the back.
This is for Austin. I don't know if you've read these, but I've noticed in the last couple of years, books where they have a combination of the internet gaming world where it interfaces with the real world. I'm thinking specifically of Ready Player One, but also the book Damon by Daniel Suarez. Have you read that one?
I haven't read Damon.
I read it.
And I haven't had a chance to read You yet, but this is interesting to me. Is have either of these, both of them have really, particularly Damon has a very political agenda in it, and I was wondering whether or not you feel like in the software gaming industry there's any kind of politics that is different than you might get in any other profession.
There does seem to be a mini trend of games and virtual reality sort of entering into the novel. I would also, there was Reamd as well, the Neil Stephenson book. Charles Stross had a novelist whose title has gone out of my head, but it's a
Halting State.
Halting State. Yes, it's a mini trend. I tend to write with very little political consciousness. I'm gonna tell you that. I do vote, but you wouldn't know it from my writing.
That's epigrammatic.
And I'm not sure what that says. It did put also into my head the Richard Powers book, Plowing the Dark, which was another model for me writing this. And I mean, it's very much worth writing about. I mean, these concentrations of technological and invention, like, they're never pure, right? They always acquire links to power and money and a political order. Obviously, a lot of the people I worked with when I was in games in the 90s had come straight from Department of Defense funded simulation projects. I myself didn't touch it, but it's certainly there to be written about.
I just sort of on that theme, I just want to take the opportunity to praise Austin's work in You, because I think part and parcel with that theme and some of these books, you see writers grappling with this real problem of kind of dramatizing what happens on screens. Because of course, a lot of drama happens on screens, it turns out. It's been going on for a while, and certainly today, really important things in our lives, and just interesting things in general happen on screens. But like, we don't know how to write about that. Like, the tools of fiction are much better suited to like daggers and guns and chariots and frankly even spaceships than stuff on flat displays. And I think some of the it's kind of a technical thing, but the way that Austin does it in You, the way interesting things appear on screens, and then sort of almost without realizing it, you're in the world depicted on the screen, and then you're kind of in and out, is pretty masterful. So, nice work.
Thank you. The first drafts looked a lot more like a software manual.
Wow, it's a whole other different way of thinking about literature than I'm used to, but it's kind of great. I think the Gibson thing is interesting to me because, number one, people saying all these people never heard of Gibson. Of course, Gibson was the biggest star in science fiction for a while, you know, and then he kind of scooted away. But science fiction, you know, it was like he was the hope of, you know, you had science fiction never had a second generation. It only had a third, you know, and so it's like if you had rock and roll where you never had, you know, had Elvis and Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and you never had Crosby, Stills and Nash, and you never had.
I wonder if there was. I wonder if there was almost an imbalance between consumption and production. Because I think I read more science fiction than anything else. And you know, you won't find this on the science fiction shelf, but I think I'm not alone in being writers of mainstream fiction, literary fiction, whatever it is, who read a ton of this stuff. I mean, just sucking it up. And so there's a sense in which it's being consumed. I mean, just like with such appetite. But then people kind of chew that up, and I don't know, like the result ends up on a different shelf or something like that.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, when you're talking about the superhero stuff, now one of our crowd, Jonathan Lethem, his first big thing was Rick,
Fortress of Solitude.
Fortress of Solitude.
Fortress of Solitude, which was a you know, and of course Michael Shayman, you know, direct, not undisguised, but also sort of displayed links to science fiction and pop and pulp.
Yeah, Lethem's got a tattoo of the cover of Ubik on his bicep. He's a huge Philip K. Dick fan.
Yeah.